Okay, now that your dado has been cut in your long board blank, we are going to talk about cutting them up into the individual side and end pieces. So you're going to be working off of your actual final draft. I just quickly drew up a sketch because this is just a board blank that I found in the woods room. So I just made a sketch to fit what I'm going to show you. It's clearly not to scale because my 5 inches is longer than my 8 inches there. But my side and my end pieces are going to be the same size. Essentially, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I drew a little 3D drawing because it'll make more sense when we talk about it this way. I've also got this guy here to show you because remember, we are going to put rabbets. Remember, rabbets are very similar to dados, but they run along the outside of your board. So we're still going to use a dado blade for it. It's just going to be along the outside instead of on the inside of your board. So what we're going to do first is you're going to cut your side pieces to length. So you have 2 side pieces, right? So you are going to cut those to the exact length that you have written down on your final draft. So for me, it's going to be 5 inches. So everything up until this point has been rough cutting to length. And now we actually have to be really careful about our measurements and make sure everything is where it's supposed to be. So before we even start cutting them to length, we want to just trim up that end a little bit. Now, my blade is going all the way down, so obviously I'm not going to cut anything off there. I'm just going to scooch it over just a little bit. So your guys' boards are probably going to be, this has already been trimmed, but I'm showing you what it's going to look like afterwards, basically. So yours are going to be, you're going to have pieces all over the place because this came off of the glue table, it went through the time saver, and you haven't trimmed anything up yet. So your ends are not going to look as nice as this. They're going to be different lengths and everything. So we're going to trim that up. We're going to make it square. Okay, so when I say squaring up your board, this is what I mean. You are squaring up the end of the board by just taking a little bit off. So that is about good right there. As long as I cut all the way along the width of my board there, I am good to go. So just a reminder, if your slider is out, okay, if it's not, if it's locked, there is this little, hard to see, lever right here. It's got a little red handle on it. And if it's sticky, okay, that was easy for me to do. But if it's sticky, it usually means that this has been kind of pulled out and it's going to be hard for me to move that. Just push the head in a little bit and then push it down. So now I can move the slider. And when you're using the slider, you always want to pull it out first and then go down and then go in and then go up. Okay, so out, down, in, up. All right. So I have trimmed up the end of my board, and now I'm going to measure to 5 inches. I'm going to use the square to run that line all the way across my board, and then I'm going to cut it again. Okay, so I got the tape measure, marked it at 5 inches, and then I took my square. Okay, make sure that there are no gaps in between this part and your wood, like that, or else you're going to get a crooked line. Okay, and then I just moved this all the way up and used my pencil to mark it all the way across. Now, this part is technically, we call that our scrap piece, okay? Even though you're gonna get your other 3 pieces out of it, but right now you're working with this piece, so we're gonna call this our scrap piece. Remember, you always wanna line the blade up on the scrap side of the line, okay? So right now, that is wrong. I am going to cut my piece too short, way too short, because I'm close to line. I didn't even try to line it up yet. This is just where it landed. So I'm gonna get this in the right position so you can see where it's supposed to be. All right, so this is my keeper side here, and you can see it is on the scrap side of my line. I don't want it on the keeper side of my line, or else my 5 inches is going to end up being too short. Okay, I'm tight to the fence. I'm all lined up. I'm going to make my first cut here. And if you're really good, you should be able to see part of your line on the keeper side of your board. So I have one piece, one side piece. I am now going to cut the other side piece, and I am going to stop. I am not going to cut my end pieces right now, and I'll get to that in a second. All right, I've got my 2 side pieces now. You can see I labeled them side. You should do that as well, and then put your name on them. And then this is going to be for my 2 end pieces, but I've not cut it up yet. And then also one thing I forgot to mention, please just make sure that you only measure 1 at a time and then cut. Measure, cut, measure, cut. Why do I want to do that? Well, I want to do that because if I measure, cut, each piece after the first one that I cut is going to continually get smaller and smaller and smaller because of the blade thickness. Okay, now why did I not want to cut my end pieces yet? Well, this piece is eventually going to look like this one where I have the rabbets in it. Okay, so I'm going to show you that next. But if I wanted my entire end to be 5 inches, like I have on my drawing here, then I need to account for this little piece on each side sticking out. So we're actually going to cut the rabbets first, and then we're going to measure how much is sticking out on each side. We're going to add those 2 measurements together, and we're going to subtract it from my 5 inches. If that's confusing right now, don't worry about it. It will make sense once your rabbets get cut and we start doing the measuring and all that stuff. All you need to do right now is just follow my directions and trust the process. So don't cut up your end pieces yet. Otherwise, you are going to have pieces that are too long, which is not a huge deal, but you're just making more work for yourself. So to make this really easy on ourselves, because we're putting the rabbet on this piece, in order to figure out how deep I need to cut in to this piece with my blade, all I'm gonna do is lay this down and then mark on the inside where it's sitting. So wherever you do this, just make sure it's on a flat surface. You don't want one part of it up here and one down here. You're not gonna get a nice straight line. And so literally all you do is you line it up like this, and you just go ahead and mark this. So it looks like that. And that's the line that you're going to line the blade up with. Okay, so I need to do this on both sides. So to make life easy, I'm just gonna flip it over like this. And you have to do this on both of your side pieces. So you're gonna be doing lots of rabbeting here. Okay, so it's gonna look like this. And then I'm gonna do this exact same thing to the second side piece. And I'll meet you back at the table saw. So again, your blade should be about half the thickness of your board. You do not have to measure this. You can eyeball it, but you want to make sure that it's not too high, or this piece up here is going to be really, really skinny, and if you drop it, it is for sure going to break. So make sure that you're eyeballing it at about half or a little under half. Don't go too far up. I forgot to mention over there that the way that we're going to line this up on the table saw, we want to transfer these lines. So again, you're just going to eyeball. We're going to transfer these lines up to the ends of our board, okay, because the table saw is going to line up right there. It'll make sense in a second. So I'm going to do that on both edges of both of my boards. So really it's going to be 1 edge, 2 edge, and then 3 edge, 4 edge, okay? So my blade height is set, and to get the fence set, I am just going to line up the blade. So before we were going off of the inside blade for our dado on the inside here, right? We went off of the inside blade, and now we're gonna go off of the outside blade. Okay, so it might be kind of hard to see, but just like when you're lining stuff up on the miter saw, I am lining the outside tooth of that blade up with my line. That's a little better. Okay, and then what's going to happen is I'm only going to make a 1/4 inch cut. Well, I'm not going to cut all the way to my end. So then I'm just going to have to keep moving the fence this way, this way, this way until my cut goes all the way to the outside. We could add more blades in here so that the cutting goes faster, but my guess is that the people who are cutting their dado for their bottoms are going to be using this table saw at the same time that you are. So instead of changing blades out and then changing them back, we're just going to end up doing it this way. So I've got my fence locked down. Please make sure you double check that the blade is still lined up after you lock the fence down, because the fence can do this or that after you lock it. So just double check that it still lines up. You still need to use a push block. You still need to use a push stick. And I forgot to mention that we need to put a sacrificial fence on here so that we don't run the blade into my actual fence. So I just grabbed a random piece of wood from over in the wood storage area and just a couple of quick grip clamps. You want to make sure that they're up stationary, up high enough so that my board doesn't run into it or my push block doesn't run into it. Okay, and I just got 2 clamps on there, and this is just going to run right alongside that. So when I go to, you know, get that all figured out, it's still the same process. So everything's set to go. I've got my push block, I've got my push stick handy. Just be careful that you don't run into this clamp here as you're running it through. Again, make sure it's not touching the blade when you turn it on. And go ahead and cut. Make sure it's against the edge of the fence. I'm going to shut it off. And then what I do is I wait for it to stop turning. And then I just bring my fence over a little bit, about a 1/4 inch, because that's how thick the blade is. Okay, and then I'm going to run it again. We'll see how that works. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do it wrong so that you can see what it looks like if I move it too far over. So you can kind of see I moved it a little too far over, and I've got this little piece in here, not the end of the world. I can just move the fence back, recut it out, and then move it pretty much right up against the sacrificial fence to get this part right there. Okay, so I've got one whole side done, and before you move on to this one right here and your other board, you want to take your other board, put them inside each other here, and make sure that you cut deep enough. If you did not cut deep enough, your end piece is going to be sticking out from your side. As you can see, okay, remember this is my side, so my side is sticking out from my end piece just a hair. That's what I want. If it's not, what's gonna happen is your end piece is sticking out from your side piece, and you're gonna have a lot of sanding to do right here to get this flush. If this is sticking out past this piece, all I have to do is sand a little bit off right here. So this is perfect. I am ready to move on to this one right here. So another way to do this, which will be a little bit quicker, but if it confuses you, just do it the way that I told you to do it. You can, now that I know that it fits in here, I can just go through and make this cut on all of my pieces and then move the fence over, do the next little section right here on the other 3 pieces, and then move my fence over one more time to get that last part on the rest of these 3 pieces. If I do that, I still want to put them inside each other and check and make sure that my side little pieces are sticking out past my end piece like I just showed you. So it's not so confusing, I'm going to show you what I actually just said. So I just made that cut on all 3 sides. Now I'm moving the fence over so I can take out the next little chunk. Okay, so my blade is stopped. I'm just kind of eyeballing it, and then I'm going to lock it, and if I need to move my fence over, I can, because remember, the fence jiggles a little bit when you go to push that locking handle down. And went too far. Oh, I didn't. Okay, this is how you move the fence just a little bit without moving it too much. Okay, so now I've got that section set up. I'm going to cut the other 3 sides here. And my pieces are so short that I actually decided I didn't need the push stick, and the push block was enough. I'm just keeping it off to the side so my hand's not directly over the blade. Okay, so you can see I've got that little chunk. Now I'm going to do my other 2 sides. Flip it, get the other one. Okay, now I'm going to shut it off so that I can move the fence over again. Of course, I want to wait for it to completely stop. I didn't show you this before, but for this last little chunk, I am going to move the fence completely over to touch the blade. That's why I put this little sacrificial fence here, so we don't cut into my regular fence. So I pretty much slid it over until it's touching, but of course, when I go to put the locking handle down, it kind of swings this way just a little bit. If it is touching, that's actually good. It's okay that it's touching it when I turn it on. I'm not going to get a kickback or anything because I've clamped down. Okay, so I'm going to turn it on and I'm going to cut the other 3 chunks. You heard it sounded kind of funky. My alarm is going off here. Let me dismiss that so that's not annoying. Okay, and then I'm just going to run the other 3. Okay, I flipped it. That was a little knot on the end that flung out. Okay, and then I got my 3rd side here. Okay. And then again, I want to take my end piece, my long board blank here, that's my ends, put it up inside here, and I'm gonna double check all of them just in case something got funky. Okay, and I am good. My end piece, that's a good angle right there. I think you can kind of see. My side piece is sticking up a little bit past my end piece here. That's exactly what I want. I am gonna check my other 2 that I just cut just to make sure, but I think I'm good. So this pretty much concludes this video on how to do the rabbets.